What's up, guys? My name is Clinton Norris, and I'm a John Paul Mitchell Systems educator.
And I'm Lucas Doney, international trainer for John Paul Mitchell Systems.
So today we're going to talk about the specific tools that we use and the cause and effect and the end result of those tools. Again, there's a huge debate over what tool is best for the job. You know, some people focus on one tool at a time. Some people only cut one with one tool or with the other, or they even have battles about it. So for me, I use one tool. I'm that guy that is just sold out. I got one lane, one trick pony, and my comfort zone is tiny. But I want to ask you some questions because I feel like I'm going to take this opportunity as well as a learning opportunity for myself. You utilize a razor in a good amount of your end results, and I kind of just wanted like a broad question, like why do you choose a razor for certain end results?
That's a great question. I mean, how much time do you have?
I know it's broad, yeah.
I think for me, you know, a lot of my background and my education background was cutting hair with scissors. You know, I didn't have a lot of formal training with a razor, so discovering that was so cool to me because I didn't know a lot about it.
Yeah.
So everything was new. It's like that first week in beauty school, like everything you do is like, wow, you can do this, you can do that.
Right.
And I think that, you know, historically, certain hairdressers have created this stigma behind a razor that it's unorganized, it's like messy, it's like got the, you know, it's just clients don't love their haircut after, or maybe they have a bad experience, so people got PTSD and they're like, don't do it. And I'm like, well, a scissor is just two razors. You're just crossing them. That's all you're doing.
You just screwed them together.
Yeah. So to me, I think, I know as time has gone on in my experience in the industry, I have learned a little bit more about cutting hair with a razor, and I was able to wrap my head around the idea that I can still have a very technical, dedicated, disciplined approach from start to finish. I just use a different tool to cut the hair.
Right.
So for me, I'm still looking at over direction, elevation, I'm still working clean, I'm still doing all these things, but what the razor does for me in the salon behind the chair is it allows me to put a little bit of different space and a little bit of different movement in the hair that a scissor doesn't allow me to do. Right. So for me, I'm able to, you know, have a little bit more weight removed during the wet relationship of the haircut, a little bit more looseness, a little bit more stone washed of an edge. Yeah. And I think on certain hair types and for certain end results, it's an ideal tool because I have to do less on the back end because I can work through it methodically and create that from start to finish.
It's almost like you're doing two birds, one stone. You're getting all of that done in one piece of the experience.
Yeah, and for me, I've over time, I think in the beginning, I wasn't that confident. It was a little sketchy.
Yeah, you're like melting hair off.
There was a discovery process.
Yeah.
And once I started to learn and kind of wrap my head around it and have more experience with it, you know, my confidence grew, so I had a better understanding of how to use the tool and how to create the best end result, you know? Yeah. So for me, I think that the learning more about it and using it more allowed me to have a better understanding, and there's certain situations where I would choose a razor just to create that end result that's a little bit softer, it's got a little bit more space in it, a little bit more room to breathe, a little bit more room to move, whereas scissor, I would have to do a little bit more extra work afterward to get the same result. Right.
So, I want to talk a little bit about the haircut that you create here after this. So, you did a layered haircut, and you did it with a razor, and, you know, looking at it from beginning to end, you didn't really have much you didn't have any refinement. You blow dried the hair, and then we did a little video. It was really easy. Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about like your thought process on the back end of it. I mean, you just blow dry and you're done. You know, is there ever any time that you would go back and potentially use a different tool besides a razor to do any refinement?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think, you know, a razor does put some space in the hair that during the wet relationship that maybe you wouldn't get the same with a scissor. You'd have to do a little bit more, you know, a few more tricks to get it. So for me, if I cut the wet shape in with a razor and then I blow dry it, I may refine it with a scissor. Yeah. I don't specifically love cutting hair dry with a razor. Some people love it. I don't necessarily like it. I've heard that. For me, I switched to a scissor, and at that point, I could deep point cut. I could slice through to make sure that it's got a really cohesive end result. Refinement around the face, maybe things like that. Maybe I remove some weight in certain areas, but my personal preference is to switch tools from wet to dry. So wet, I'd cut it with a razor. Dry, I'd refine it with a scissor, because I get a little bit more control. It's a little bit easier to work with the hair with a scissor versus a razor. Kind of creates too much trauma on the hair, in my opinion.
Right. I love it. And it was really cool watching you do it, especially since we created something that was similar.
Yeah.
But there were different end results. It's almost like you would do a consultation and then decide the tool instead of say, I'm a razor hair cutter or I'm a scissor hair cutter. It's almost like you would take in all the information and then make that choice. So let's intro your haircut.
Yeah, let's check it out.
Just taking a quick glance at our zones here. We've got 2 in the front, 2 in the back, standard 4 zones. Set us up for success on our haircut. Keep the 2 clipped away and combed down. I'll be starting the haircut in the front. So I'm gonna work with a razor. Keeping my elevation consistent, pulling that hair straight out. You can see that I'm cutting from the middle out to the longer lengths. The reason why I chose to do that is because the center length is going to be the shortest.
Now, when you're making these priority decisions, Lucas, do you tend to think about length and adjustments? Are you able to maybe adapt like you're doing now?
Yeah, exactly. So I always understand that I keep in mind that you can always cut hair shorter. You know, I'm not in the business of cutting hair back on the head. So for me, I'm always going to check, double check, make sure section number 1 is where I want it to be, because I'm going to use that as a bit of a reference for the entire haircut. It's going to kind of help us maintain consistency in the front, as well as when we work through the back, we'll take some guidelines from the front sections. So section number 1 is so massively important.
And one of the things that I like that you say is section number 1 is the most important section of any haircut. So this, being the most important, I mean, it seems like you're putting a lot of effort into section number 1 differently than you would maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on down the road.
Yeah, and I think that that's what needs to happen with haircutting is we need to pay attention to section number 1. And that's really going to set us up to win for the rest of the haircut. And as you can see, as I start moving through, I'm taking parallel diagonal back sections that mirror the angle of the hairline, pulling everything to section number 1. So that stationary guide, cutting short to long. So I'm pulling all that hair forward and I'm pulling it up and cutting it horizontally. So that hair towards the sideburn area has longer to travel. Therefore, it's maintaining length.
Side number 2 here.
Yeah, side number 2, same approach. I'm always going to cut from short to long, especially when I'm using a razor. That just allows me to compensate for any push that the razor could influence on the hair. So I want to make sure that I'm maintaining that short to long feel, keeping the center lengths the shortest, and as we get towards the hairline and the corners and the ears, I want to maintain some length. And right here you can see me using a technique called tipping to kind of remove some weight from that hair, because on the top of the head I want to create some space, I want to have some movement, so later on when we dress it out and we finish it, the hair has some room to breathe, some room to move around. And that will give us a little bit more versatility with the style.
And I love here too how you visually do an inspection. You're not cross-checking right here, you're just giving it a good toss around.
Yeah, and I think that there's a time and a place for a really technical cross-check, and there's a time and a place for what is this hair gonna do naturally? What's it gonna do organically? If I didn't do anything, how's it gonna air dry? Mm-hmm. And then here you see, moving to the back, as I said earlier, taking a reference point from the front, that's gonna give me a clue so that I have some cohesion as far as front to back goes. I want to make sure that those lengths speak to each other. I don't want them to be the exact same, but I want them to speak the same language.
Yeah, it's like they're telling the same story.
Yeah. Super important. Still cutting short to long. I know that those internal lengths are going to be shorter. The external lengths are going to be longer. So you can see on these sections, I'm slowly sliding my fingers out towards the lengths of the hair. Mm-hmm. And I'm using a little bit more of an open stroke. The open stroke allows me to put a little bit of a softer edge on it. So you can see that when I move the razor, it moves a little bit more. It's covering more ground. So that edge, that cutting line is going to be a little bit softer.
I noticed that too, because in the very front sections, there's probably, I'm learning from you as we go, but the front has less hair. There's more maybe opportunities for challenges. And so that little more closed stroke that you did, probably a little more precise, a little safer, where this, you have so much room and you need more room for the hair to breathe. So that larger stroke makes more sense.
And that's such a valid point, because the front of the head from the ear forward, we have less hair. So I want to create something that's a little bit stronger to compensate for less hair. As I'm working through the back, there's just far more density and more hair to work with. So I'm going to have to put more nooks and crannies and a little bit more room for the hair to move around or collapse or inflate or all these, compensate for texture, all these things. So I tend to use a little bit more of an open stroke when dealing with a higher density or more hair.
And then too, here it seems like, now that you're on to section 2, section 3, that you're pulling it slightly backwards.
Yeah, my over direction is towards the previous section. So not straight back to number 1. I'm going to the previous. So if you were going to use a cut by numbers system, say 1 is in the center, 2 goes to 1, 3 goes to 2, 4 goes to 3, 5 goes to 4. So that's going to help us maintain a little bit of length and density towards the ears where we have the weakest amount of hair.
Nice.
Yeah, and as you can see here, just kind of taking a look at like what that hair is doing, using a little bit of a finishing spray to kind of dress it out, how someone would wear it. So traditionally people don't walk down the street with hair just right in front of their eyes. So I'm just using a little bit of a finishing spray to kind of dress that out of the eyes, how somebody would potentially wear it.
Yeah, it looks so good. And this is something that's salon friendly. I mean, watching you do it, filming you do it, I mean, it wasn't that long of a haircut and of an experience. And then here, effortlessly, they could just do a couple things as they get ready for their day.
Yeah, and if they have natural texture, they could get away with that without any spray.
Yeah.
You know, they could kind of wet sculpt it, maybe a little bit of foam, or maybe a couple of setting clips. They could get that end result really, really easily. And like you said, it's got a lot of options as far as how they could finish it, how they could wear it. So
here's a little 360 view. Great.
yeah, really collapsed. Obviously, a mannequin doesn't have shoulders, but that would sit kind of just past the shoulders, that shag kind of mullet 2.0 reinvention.